Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
What's up, friends? Welcome into episode 155. In this episode, you're going to be hearing from one of my absolute favorite people in the WordPress and web design realm. This is Chris Badgett. He is the founder and CEO of LifterLMS, which is an awesome learning management system for WordPress, which is where you can do memberships, courses, online programs, gated content, all sorts of awesome stuff. Now, the reason I wanted to have Chris on for this episode is because he is somebody who is extremely passionate about what he does, and he loves his business and the people he works with and his customers. And I think that's really interesting, mainly because he's been at it for a long time. I wanted to have him on to talk about this idea of keeping the passion alive for your business, particularly as you get years down the road, because as we all know, or even if you're early in the game and you're not yet aware, passion tends to fade, particularly when you are in your business and it starts running you, and then all the stresses and complexities of running your business kind of tend to take hold. That is very common, and Chris has done an amazing job at just loving his business every day. It's something that I have really tried to apply to my business. It's something I'm encouraging all of my students to do, which is to love every day of your business. Do what you have to do to protect that and to make sure you keep that passion alive. You really have to be intentional about this, because I've found if you're not intentional about keeping the passion alive for your business is going to take over, and it's suddenly not going to be so fun. I don't want you to wake up and dread getting started in your business. I want you to love it, because we spend a lot of time in our business. We might as well love what we do. So I'm so excited to have Chris back onto the podcast to talk about this. Now, one thing that I found in the web design world that can help reignite your passion and can help you start having some fun in web design is design. Focusing on design is personally, I think, one of the funnest aspects of web design. I don't personally love SEO or content or some of the other areas of web design. They're really important, and I definitely encourage you to learn about that. But design itself is something that I've found to be super fun, because you see an instant reward, an instant result when you design something new. And there's nothing better than getting good conversions for your clients when it comes to creating beautiful designs that actually convert. So if you want to have some fun in your business and you want to get some training on how to have great fun and make better, great designs, check out my website design course. That is out now, and it's open and available for you to check out. Again, I talk about design in depth, and it is by far the most fun course I have. Or is it the most fun or the funnest course? One of those. I would love to welcome you into the course and help you keep the fire alive in your business by creating awesome designs and conversion-based design. So check that out today. It's available for you now. You can actually just go to joshhall.co/design, and that'll zip you over there. I would love to help you create some awesome designs to keep your passion alive in your business. And now, without further ado, we're going to hear from my man, Chris Badgett of LifterLMS, on a lot of tactics, methods, and strategies for how you can keep passion in your business alive for the long haul. Enjoy. Chris, welcome back onto the podcast, my friends. So good to have you back on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Josh. I'm super excited to get into it with you today. We always talk about really interesting topics and go deep and have a lot of shared interests. I'm excited.
I agree, man. When I was on your podcast the second time, you said I felt like you felt like I was a brother from another mother. And I share that sentiment, man. I really enjoyed chatting with you. You're one of my favorites in the WordPress game. And I just love what you're up to as a business, as the owner of LifterLMS, but also just you as a person. You're such a cool guy to chat with, but you also have a lot of technical knowledge, but also a lot of business knowledge and passion. I think one reason I wanted to have you back on the show, which, can you believe you were episode 71 in your first episode, which we talked about your journey from dog sled runner to CEO of LifterLMS, but I think you're going to be in the 150s now. So, really cool to have you on, halfway through the podcast again. But in this talk, we're going to talk about passion and keeping it alive. And I'm really, really excited about that. I think it's more important than ever, particularly for folks who have been in it for a while. You tend to lose passion a little bit. And sometimes business and life can get in the way, or sometimes you can forget about the passion. So without, diving too far into my own intro on this, I just really, really excited to chat with you. Before we dive in, man, do you want to let everybody know who doesn't know you, where you're based out of? And when somebody asks, Chris, what do you do for a living? What do you tell them?
Sure. So I'm Chris Badgett. I'm based out of the Bay Area, and that's Belfast Bay, which is a small Maine coastal town. I actually started my business this current business in Montana, and then we lived in an RV, and we ultimately settled on a little farm in Maine. So that's where I live. I'm a dad. I homeschool our kids. We have 2 girls and a bunch of farm animals, and we spend a lot of time outside. People say I'm kind of a unique combination of analog and digital. So as soon as I get off this call, I might go out helping with farm chores. But to tell people what I do for work, depending upon who I'm talking to, I answer that question differently. So the quick, answer is I help people build online learning platforms or online schools. But that project is called LifterLMS. It's a learning management system for WordPress that helps people create courses, training-based membership sites, that kind of thing. 7 years old as of right around this time. And before that, I ran an agency for several years specializing in membership sites. So I'm about a decade in this game.
Yeah, a decade into it. And the passion is still alive for you, man. That's why I'm so excited to chat about this, to pick your brain about what you've experienced in keeping the flame alive, for lack of a better terms. And this actually stemmed off of the recent news of LearnDash being sold and the acquisition of LearnDash, because I use LearnDash for my courses. This was actually before I discovered you in Lifter. So had I discovered you first, maybe a different story, but I still love that we're able to talk about this, and you have an amazing platform with Lifter. But what was interesting is Justin, the CEO of LearnDash, came out and basically publicly said he was just a bit fried, for lack of a better term. Like he didn't have the passion for it anymore. He felt like it was lost. And the thing about that is I don't respect Justin any less for that. In fact, I respect him more. And I see you nodding your head. Maybe you feel the same way. I feel like if somebody really just loses the passion for something, either way, I would much rather, as a customer, have somebody else manage it rather than him just try to force his way through it, So that's what kind of started this whole conversation, because I asked you some questions just straight up about what you thought about the whole process and everything. And I actually, I'm not going to share anything sensitive information, but I just wanted to share your reply to my email, because essentially I just asked you, what were your thoughts, your honest thoughts of it? And here again, I'm not going to share anything that would be sensitive, but you replied to me and said, in terms of Justin selling LearnDash, it's really just an unknown right now as far as the impact to the product and the acquisition that we'll have on it. In terms of an opportunity for Lifter, because I asked you, is this a chance for Lifter to come to the forefront and even elevate your brand even more since you've been consistent? You said we're continuing to focus on customers, building the WordPress course creator community, and evolving the product, which a few things I want to dive into there as we move forward. But you said our team is still super passionate and excited about the e-learning and WordPress. I feel like I'm just getting started, even though we're 7 years in, and I still have a lot of fun and I'm enjoying the journey. So I wanted to just say that out loud to you, because I don't know if you remember sending that over to me, but I just love that email. There was a few things in there that I figured we could unpack in this call. But I guess to even just kick us off, man, I guess I kind of summed it up right there, but what is your overall feeling being 7 years into Lifter and a decade into your journey, of where you're at now? I need just initial thoughts about what you've done to keep the passion alive.
Yeah. And there's so many areas of this answer. The first thing I'll just say is just something I learned about myself. I didn't really realize I was an entrepreneur until later in life. It was really after I've probably talked about it in our last episode about managing an eco tour business in Alaska and helping train dogs for the Iditarod sled dog race with my mentor and boss up there. That's kind of where I learned the basics of business operations. But before that story began, I was just a regular kind of college. I grew up in a college town. I went to a college up in the mountains, discovered a passion for nature and the wilderness and rock climbing and long distance hiking and stuff like that. I did, got into alpine mountaineering and, I lived in the back of my car and I climbed mountains. And basically since a young age or more so as a young adult, I realized that it's kind of funny to say it this way, but it's almost like I was born with like a middle finger on my forehead. And what I mean by that is I always had this sense that life is like this really big gift. Why waste it doing something you don't enjoy? And so what I would do pre-entrepreneur Chris is I would do things like live in my car with my climbing buddies, shop at really cheap places to buy food, don't go out to eat, like spend most of my time outdoors because I loved it. And that's what lit me up with passion. That's what brought me into Alaska. That's what brought me into dogs. When I discovered WordPress and this idea that you could create like this page on the internet that you could manipulate from anywhere in the world and the entire world could see it, it just kind of blew my mind. I didn't realize it. But in some ways, I was kind of like the perfect WordPress user in the sense that I've been on all sides of WordPress at this point. Like I've hacked together a little code. I'm by no means a developer. I've blogged. I've run an agency. I've created WordPress products. I've advised WordPress companies. There's all kinds of I've been all around WordPress, but I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the community. I love things like organic farming and raising my kids the way we're doing it and stuff like that. So I just follow my passion and wherever that takes me, I go. So at the highest level, I think that Henry David Thoreau quote that the something about people leading lives of quiet desperation, that's like literally my worst fear. And it's not easy. Every time I've followed my passion, there's always been some kind of sacrifice or trade-off or coming in on the bottom of the totem pole, working my way up, figuring out how to make ends meet.
What's that full quote, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know it?
I believe it's the massive men lead lives of quiet desperation. And to me, I thought that's like the biggest tragedy in the world to have that kind of life, to be just unsatisfied and kind of stuck and trapped. And I totally get that there's a lot of circumstances and situations where you don't have a choice. But that always inspired me. And then there's something about my personality type as well, where I'm a super empath or empathetic person. I feel the emotions of others. I see opportunity inside of other people. And when I look around in the world, I see all this like value trapped inside people. And, you come across a really productive entrepreneur and they're figuring out like how to harness that and build energy and get people around the project and create this momentum. But I also see that spark inside of a lot of people and it's not activated. It's one of the reasons why I will say that my company mission is my life mission, which is to lift up others through education. And that passion, it applies to LifterLMS, it applies to the agency we run, it applies to how we raise our kids, it applies to how I, as an adult, approach just continuous learning and improvement and exploration, because that's where all the great magic comes from. You got to feed the fire and figure out how to handle the tough parts and be true to yourself. So that's the high level stuff. I can get more tactical, but that's the high level.
That's the outline right there, man. I think you just laid the foundation for us to dive into each one of those points. And one, I think personally, where I'd love to start off here is having that passion. And I think you did a really good job at kind of outlining where the passion started for you and why you feel that way. I think a lot of people probably resonate with that. I know as a web designer, I just loved helping people and I loved building websites that they were proud of and they could show off and help grow their business. But eventually you become a business owner. And as an entrepreneur, there, like you mentioned, there's a lot of other things that come with that. And what I hate to see is when those other things put out that flame of passion, or they kind of trump what you love about the business, or maybe in some cases, somebody loves designing websites, but they just can't stand getting content from clients or, something like that, or managing a lot of projects. A lot of times those things can be what derails somebody and kind of puts out that passion and takes that flame out. So I guess one of the first questions I have for you is, how do you protect passion when you're dealing with all the other things that come with it?
There's a lot of ways to protect passion. One that's kind of easy to say, but harder to do is people. So if you don't like getting content from clients, hire a project manager. If you can't afford that yet, that's why it's easier said than done. Like if you're at the beginning of the journey as an entrepreneur, you have to wear all the hats. If you have no outside resources until you have the cash flow to be able to build a team and delegate. So people is one way to protect it. The other way is, it's a trick I intuitively learned just from my time in the wilderness. And I've spent like a lot of time like in the wilderness, like sometimes over a month, no roads, no stuff, like just deep in British Columbia, like, or different parts of the world. And when you go into that kind of space, the monkey mind quiets down and runs out of stuff to say. So you kind of get to know yourself. And as an entrepreneur, one of the things I learned, I'm a big framework guy. So I like finding tools and systems to like help me, because I'm an entrepreneur. I can invent everything from scratch if I need to, but I really like finding things that actually work off the shelf. So there's a great woman, her name's Sherry Walling. She has a podcast called Zen Founder. And she has this process. It's an ebook on her site called a Founder Retreat, which I just follow her process, and I'll literally, go on a 3 or 4 day retreat by myself, even in my own town, away from my family, but to a new place like an Airbnb or something. And I will go through the process in this book, which is kind of like a check-in. It can be used for different things, to like make hard decisions, to prioritize what you're doing, to let go of things that aren't serving you and stuff like that. So I really recommend that her Founder Retreat technique. So, but at its core, what that is you protect passion by not losing the thread of who you are as a person. Because, there's a lot of ideas out in the world of, what you should be as like a business person, or as a parent, or as a friend, or as a partner, or as a good citizen in society. But under all that, there's still just you. There's like this core you inside all these layers of the onion. And if you stay close to that and you check in with that, that voice will kind of guide you of like what's working and what's not working. And it may be, you may have to make some hard decisions there. So those are some more. And then another one that I think is super important is to like kind of like rest and recover. So just like when you work out for athletics, the recovery is just as important as the training. So as an entrepreneur, protecting yourself from burnout is important. And the older I got, like I'm over 40 now. I'm 43. So I still think sometimes I'm
You'd pass for 36, by the way, man. Probably because all that outside time.
Probably, but you burn out. Like I can't, like when I was 22, sometimes I'd stay up like all night working on something, get 3 hours of sleep, and then boom, on to the next. I can't do that anymore. So protecting yourself both physically, mentally, and emotionally from burnout is important. And if you hit a patch of burnout, you have to acknowledge it. And it's sort of like your body raising the flag and be like, all right, I need a break. Like you kind of need to just like chill out for a week and don't make any major decisions. And I could get into some stories of where I've faced some burnout and things that happen there if you want, but but don't mistake burnout for losing your passion. They're different. So
that's a good point. And I know there's different levels to this, like when it comes to burnout and you're just done for a season or a week, a few days or longer, whatever it is. And there's also just times where, for me personally, right now, I'm in a period where at the time of recording this, I just launched version 2.0 of my maintenance plan course at the time of recording this call, at least. I'm a little zonked right now because it's been a month of a lot of hard work and intensive work. And I've learned in my journey to kind of plan for the recovery period, like you mentioned. So I knew this week the course is going through a launch cycle and sales cycle. I'm not taking on too many calls. I'm not doing anything major in the business. I'm not working on the next course yet because I know I'm still recovering. I'm having kind of a light week this week. And I think that's probably a good tip that anyone could take away is if you know you're going to have really busy seasons, or you know you have a lot of projects on tap and they're all going to wrap up around the same time, maybe plan things out to where you have a week where you can have a bit of a light week and not kill yourself and not work the 9 to 5, 40 hours a week or even more that often freelancers feel like we have to work. I know that was a big thing for me. If I wasn't working all day on a weekday, I felt weird, but I had to learn it's all right. Like yesterday, we're recording this on a Tuesday. Mondays are kind of my just whatever days, whatever I want to work on. I don't take calls on Mondays. I just felt completely off. I told my wife, I was like, I've got nothing today. And luckily, this is why I have those kind of days sometimes. So when I do feel like that, luckily there was no calls and we just took our girls and we went for a drive and we got some lunch and babies took a car nap. We're building a house right now, as you mentioned before we went live. So we went to check that out. So that's what we did. And I still got some work done, but it was around the feeling of like, I don't have much in the tank right now because of such an intensive month. So any thoughts on that with just like planning for those times when you know you're going to be busy and you know you almost have to plan for the downtime too, right? Like plan for some recovery.
I'm not that smart. And what I mean by that is it takes me getting burned to start planning. So I remember once in my agency days where we had this thing and we were working with an Australian client and we were setting dates long in advance. And we didn't realize we like scheduled a massive like deployment right in the middle of Thanksgiving, and we hosed everybody's like plans in America that worked on our project. And then it created like this backlash of like burnout and overwhelm, not just in me, but also in some team members. So yeah, sometimes you have to go through the fire before you wisen up. So that's one thing. But if you're listening to this, be smarter. Don't wait to get burned before you kind of plan this. I'll give you two more answers, one at a macro level and one at a micro level. At the macro level, we were talking about the challenges of, quarterly and annually planning before we hit record. And one of the things that web design will teach you, there's this whole concept of like a waterfall project or going agile and working in 2-week sprints. But the thing that happens that causes the most burnout in agencies and just entrepreneurs in general is trying to fit too much into your actual capacity. So if you learn how to plan, like we have this many like hours or this many story points or this many, whatever you want to call it. And if you try to cram something new in, you need to take something else out and also kind of build in that buffer recovery time. But probably the most important thing that's helped me in that regard is actually the morning routine I developed. It was actually one of the first online courses I took by a guy named Evan Pagan called Wake Up Productive. And he kind of went into this, like, it was just like a course, old school, like online course days. I think the course might've even come in like a Dropbox folder of videos or something, but it was about how to craft like the perfect morning routine. And I started building that out in 2009 or something like that. And to this day, I've continued to evolve a morning routine that just supports me in terms of like setting me up for the day, taking care of my health and getting organized, getting planned. And then also the end of the day, if you can figure out how to disconnect especially to connect with your partner, or your friends, or your family, and also give yourself the ability to go to sleep without being stressed out. That morning and evening are super important. And it's I see a lot of entrepreneurs just, wake up, grab the phone and just reactive mode and then feel guilty, maybe, and then go to bed, just like spent and then rinse and repeat.
That's a good point. And look, this all feeds in these little tactics. Every one of these little tips we've covered so far all feed into keeping passion alive in the long run, because it compounds, doesn't it? Like you feel if you can't get away from your email or your phone here, then that's going to bleed into your productivity. If you're behind on your projects, then you can't take time off. If you can't take time off, you're constantly stressed. And if you're constantly stressed, it bleeds into your personal life. This is magnified by 100 when you have a family. You were talking about morning routine. Right now, we're in a stage with my daughters where I've got an almost 2-year-old right now, and she's going through a bit of a sleep regression. So like, I'm super jealous of having a nice morning routine, but it's literally just not practical right now with what we like. It's a bit of a free for all with sleeping and everything that we're going through right now. Luckily, my daughters are really good sleepers overall, so I have it pretty good. But it definitely, like, all of these things are so much more intricate and complex with a family. And I think it's really important for young entrepreneurs to get this now before they do end up having families. And then luckily for everyone listening who does have a family, it's never too late. It's never too late to change things and pivot. And that's a big part of, I'm sure, what you've gone through and what I've learned as well. But these are really, really important things that will all feed into the lifelong passion and keeping that alive. And passion itself can change. But I guess what we're really talking about here is avoiding burnout. And it is those little things that compound, aren't they? Like, it's the little habits, it's the little things we do, it's the little disciplines that make a big, big difference in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And to that note, another part, especially around the family, is just having honest conversations with your partner. And it depends. Like, maybe you're an entrepreneur married to another entrepreneur, or maybe you're an entrepreneur married to a non-entrepreneur. Not that that's better or worse. It's just different. So your brains and like how you approach reality are like really different. So one of the things that really worked in my household is that, my wife learned to just understand the craziness of Chris, the entrepreneur, and how important this morning routine was to me. So even as in the harder days with the young kids and all this, she was not bitter at me when I was trying to like kind of protect my morning routine, maybe do a minimal, smaller version of it, but still get it in, because she knew that was better for my mental health, even if she had to do more. And then, of course, I would do as much as I possibly can with the other full-time job of being a parent as well. So it's having those honest conversations with your friends, family, and loved ones are super important. And then the place to build on that is actually to find community. So I have all these different tribes I run in. And a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, they feel pretty misunderstood. Or if you're like some kind of subject matter expert, like in WordPress or in whatever your hobby is, making cabinets, you might, by going out and finding these communities for me, I'm part of like an outdoor kind of climbing world. I'm part of a long distance hiking world. I'm out of like a homeschooling, organic farming world. I'm part of a WordPress world. I'm part of a startup entrepreneur world. A software world. I've gone out of my bubble and I've invested in myself and gone to events, free and paid, of cheap, expensive, so that I can connect. Even this podcast is an example, like connecting with another entrepreneur, another podcaster. This is the community aspect, which helps kind of, keep your passion alive and makes you feel less misunderstood when you go hang out with a bunch of crazy people just like you and whatever X is.
Yeah, that's a great point. The community aspect. I mean, I think everyone listening to the podcast knows how important this is to me and what I'm doing. And I have quite a few different channels of community set up between a free Facebook group and my premium web design club, my student center. And I see the importance of that at every level, because the reality is, particularly as web designers, we are, whether we know it or not, entrepreneurs and freelancers. And the average world, the corporate world, is not going to understand us, and they don't get what we go through. You talked about your wife. My wife was similar. Like, it took me a long time to kind of figure out how to explain to her what I do and the kind of challenges that I've had. And over the years, she's seen that. And to your point, like, she kind of knows now, like, if I'm in course mode, I'm going to be really busy. And if the kids are going nuts and whatever, and I just need to get out of the house, she's not bitter by that. She's like, Daddy, he's got to work. He needs to go get what he needs to do, what he needs to do to get stuff done. So that is a big part of it. There's the professional community, there's personal community. Man, you said it though, Chris, like just being able to share about some of these feelings that an average salary worker probably isn't going to understand. That is crucial. So I think that's a great point to really put emphasis on some sort of community. And there's one thing I could tell Josh from years ago to do. It would have been to get into some sort of community much sooner. I basically did everything myself, and Google was my partner, my friend for a long time. And that helped with like learning web design and all that. But what didn't help was the periods of burnout that I personally faced. And again, because I'm a blue collar guy at heart, put my work boots on and I will just work, which is great. But when I was wearing all the hats, I had to really catch myself and realize that I was working way too much and I wasn't being very productive, and all the sorts of things that can come into play if you're not prioritizing your health mentally, physically, and everything else. And luckily I didn't have a family at that time. So it was only me that I was hurting at that point. But you did talk about a little bit about some of those burnout periods. I would love to unpack some of those. If you could give us like one example of a really tough type of situation you went through from a burnout perspective, offhand, what happened, and more importantly, how did you get through it and what did you learn from it?
I will do that. And before I do that, I just want to give you a pro tip I heard on a podcast like this about talking to your spouse about a product launch. I heard this on somebody's podcast. I give them credit if I could remember who it was, but sometimes these are the exact words to use with your spouse. So my wife's name is Sam. So I would go up to her and I would say, and this doesn't happen very often, but I learned to say this. And when I said it, it made all the difference, which is, hey, Sam, just heads up next week or, Monday, Tuesday, I'm doing a product launch. I'm going to be a little bit emotionally unavailable during that time. And you're going to see me just like really kind of burning the candle at both ends. I appreciate your support. But anyways, that kind of heads up really helps. But in terms of
great point. In
terms of burnout, probably the hardest part is really for any bootstrapped entrepreneur, especially, is crossing the chasm of zero to like sustainable business, right? So for me, what that looked like is running an agency. At this point, I got it up to like 17 people. Launched LifterLMS. This is in 2014, about 7 years ago. It was in October of 2014. And our agency was doing quite well, and it was a higher end agency, but we were just burning cash because we were doing a lot of custom development, a lot of high end work. I had to always be hiring, paying top dollar, really just, lots of people on the call with the client. This is a high end agency, which in and of itself is exhausting. But when we first launched LifterLMS, we got 42 customers on the first week. And I said, if we get 100, we'll keep it alive. We'll keep going the project. We only got 42. But I said, we're going to keep it alive anyways. We're going to keep going. But anyways, that first year, it just wasn't pulling in the money, and all the profit we were sucking out of the agency to like focus on developing the product. And a combination of factors happened. My wife was going to get a job that fell through. We were getting ready to move and then we didn't. And then we had to move real quick into not the ideal rental. And it was just like this pressure pot of circumstances. And I just got super burnt out. And I actually did something really extreme, which I wouldn't recommend without consulting with a doctor. But I did I wanted to go through like a full reset because I was just overloaded from trying to like become an online business owner, an entrepreneur. And I just felt like I really needed to reset. So I actually did at home, I did like an extended water fast, which is drinking only water for several weeks actually.
Oh man.
And essentially what it did is it basically, it's like a full reset. In hindsight, it was one of the best things I've ever done, but you have to if you're thinking about it, you should consult a professional about doing that. But when I came out of that, it was like a pivotal point in my life where I was able to like kind of discard this kind of stress ball and rebuild myself brick by brick going forward, stronger, better, with all that like kind of pin up anxiety and energy gone. And from there, things started clicking, things started going better. But I had that water fast period was kind of it was just a big reset. Like for me, that's what it meant for me. For somebody else, maybe you need to just go on a vacation and go somewhere, or have a long weekend, or take a month off, or put your phone in a safe for like a month or something.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're really getting to, and there's drastic examples of this, like you just talked about, but there's also way less drastic examples, which is to change your state, to physically and mentally change your state. For me, that's usually as simple as going for a walk, or like I know recently in my web design club, we have one of our members, April, who was going through a really tough situation with one of her clients, and her client would not pay. And she was really stressed. She got my 2 cents about it and some feedback from the other members. And she was about ready to go for a run after our call. Well, actually just today that was last week, we heard that after her run, she got back to her. She felt good. She was stern, but not, mean or jerk, but she really just was stern about needing to get paid, and the client apologized and they got it worked out. So just that simple act of like the community aspect, getting another set of, eyes on the situation, and then changing her state, going for a run, really helped her. And I think it's really at the core what you're talking about. Again, yours is a drastic example, but maybe, I don't know all the details that you were going through, but maybe that you were in that place of life where you really needed a drastic reset. I'm actually curious, like for you, what was the impetus of going that drastic with that type of water fast, as opposed to just going for a vacation, or in your case, just going off grid for a week and hiking? Did you feel like metabolically and everything you just needed to completely have a clean slate, as you kind of mentioned, or why so drastic?
Part of it's just my personality. Like, running sled dogs hundreds of miles, or long distance hiking thousands of miles, or climbing mountains. Like, I'm kind of an extreme personality type. So if I was going to do it, it's
funny because you're so chill. Like, you sound so chill.
I know. I'm not like this, like over the top guy about those kinds of things. It's just what I really enjoy. So I knew, I'm like, all right, I want to go all the way here. And I think part of it too, and you mentioned, I believe her name was April in your community. Perhaps sometimes these things like imposter syndrome come up. Like if a client isn't paying, maybe what does that say about my value, or as an entrepreneur, the work I provided? If I'm not as successful with my product or my agency, maybe I'm just not that good. These are all these like kind of imposter stuff. And I think the big thing that whether I like really consciously knew it or not, but when I came back and kind of rebuilt from that, was I really owned it. Like, this is like, I'm burning the ships. Like, this is Chris, the entrepreneur. I love this stuff. I just need to get through this dip. I'm owning this 100%. Let's go. And, I could see like an energy shift around me, like in the sense of, things started clicking more, attracting more partnerships, and things just made sense. Things just made sense more. So yeah, it's just kind of that, it's crossing a chasm, it sounds, you can see it, you can read a book like The Lean Startup, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to validate the product. And you hear these stories, like most entrepreneurs, it takes 3 years to replace their job income levels or whatever. And for me, I think it took like 4 or 5. I'm like, all right, that's fine. But those are like some hard years, especially if you don't have like a lot of resources on the side to help support that. So it's that period of making that decision. It feels good when you're like, all right, I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to be an entrepreneur, but to actually do it is super hard in the beginning.
Well, and a big shift I think we're seeing now in entrepreneurship is I think so many people are burned out that there is such a push for mental health and for balance, especially work-life balance when it comes to people working from home, which the whole world kind of entered our world last year in 2020, it was like, well, welcome to what we do every day with Zoom calls and, trying to turn off our brains at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever. There is a lot to that, which I'm really excited about the landscape of entrepreneurship now, because there is a lot more talk about that. And I've always felt like it's so much more important to focus on sustainability rather than just chasing the next big opportunity or the next big client or whatever that looks like. It's so much more important to make sure day to day you're enjoying yourself. And I think that goes back to the planning thing we were talking about briefly, which is where you could plan a year out, but then what's your capacity look like? What are you going to have to fill your days with in order to get to that goal? Is it worth it? Or do you want to take things, by quarter? There's kind of a difference between what you need to have to support yourself and your family, and then what you need to have to support your business. And then what it looks like from there. Like, what's it going to look like for what have you launched or what your prices are? So I say all that to say that makes a lot of sense, man, to kind of, and again, it's going to figure out, or it's going to look different for everybody as far as what you need to figure out to do in those periods. But it really is interesting to hear you, as such a chill type of person, to want to go that hardcore into something. I guess that's kind of common though, right? It's like, while a bunch of rock climbers are really chill people, or like surfers are really chill, but then they're nuts in the waves. And even a lot of athletes, like I'm a hockey guy. So a lot, those dudes will destroy each other, and then they come back and then they're like, yeah, that was a pretty good shift, man. So it's very different from people who are like lively and charismatic, but maybe they're not that way from an action standpoint. Anyway, without derailing us in the psychology of that, I do find that fascinating. Now, I do have one question about that, because I'm so interested in that drastic approach. Not that I'm ever going to do that, but it's fascinating to me. Was there any part of you that did that because you felt like, if I could get through these other situations would feel not as bad? Was that at all in your mind, or?
I don't think so, but only because I had already learned that lesson in the wilderness. I'd been in several on the edge of like major catastrophe, potentially even death situations in climbing environments or in alpine mountain environments. The nature taught me about, if I can do this, I can do anything. So I think I had already figured that out. Like, nature is the best teacher, but in my opinion. So and that's one of the ways, honestly, that keeps my passion alive as well, is just that nature connection. Like this morning I was walking in the woods. That's like always like a natural reset, and your head kind of empties out a little bit. But yeah, that's, it wasn't that I needed to prove something to myself. It was more, and I didn't just like go all in. Like I had tried it before. Like I did like a 3-day juice fast, and then I did like, like some intermittent fasting, and I saw like results on a kind of validation test level. Like, okay, this is cool. This is neat. And then I studied it like crazy. I mean, I went really deep. I went into all this research, books, YouTube channels, and I'm like, cool. I was pretty like, it wasn't like on a whim. I prepared for it for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating, man. Again, changing your state, whatever that could look like, that there's definitely a lot of power in that. Now, I would love to talk about planning for these type of seasons versus just being reactionary to them. Like you said, a lot of people just burn out, and they're like, oh, then they've got to do something about it. You mentioned that my whole plan after a course launch is that I kind of take some soft work days and stuff. The only reason I have learned to do that is because with revamping this last course, that would technically be my 11th course. And I learned every course I did that I was completely and utterly exhausted after launching a course. And as a course creator, and I mean, all projects are exhausting, but I'll tell you what, there's something extra exhausting about a course in particular, and like putting all of your knowledge in a subject, particularly if it's a bigger course, from planning, content creation, recording, post-editing, post-production, launching, marketing, fulfill. Like there's all these aspects to it that are quite draining. And I'm just saying, I learned after about 5 or 6 courses that the week after I launch a course, I'm going to be done. So keep it light, keep it simple. I could take like a full week off if I wanted to, but I didn't really feel that need for right now. But I do try to kind of plan around those launches. Where are you at with planning for that stuff when it comes to projects versus just letting that burned out feeling kind of creep up? Have you learned, or do you have any tips or tricks for kind of knowing when those are going to come or anticipating those that maybe my audience could pull from in their projects and their day to day?
This is probably going to be one of the most valuable parts of the episode because I nerd out on this stuff.
All right, here we go.
The first thing I would just kind of weave into what we were just talking about this idea of going on a founder retreat, going on a vision quest, going on a reset, going on a dopamine detox, whatever you want to call it, to just kind of reconnect with yourself. And then there's so just kind of, it's not just about making money. So there's like this social science research. These two guys, their names were Ryan and DC. I can't remember their first names, but they created and studied and found this theory of motivation, which really humans are driven by three things. One of them is autonomy. So like freedom and agency to do what you want to do. Another one is relatedness. It's like the human connection. And then the other one is competence, like to get better and better at something. So when you look at your online business or whatever it is, this effort you're going to do is it going to allow you more freedom in your life, not just like financial, but just freedom and agency to do what you want to do, be around who you want to be, work the way you want to work, and so on. Is it going to be with people you enjoy? Like if you're going to build a web design agency, one of my top tips is to focus on a niche with people you like. So for example, I have a background in outdoor tourism. If I was going to do it again, I might focus my agency on like adventure outdoor location businesses, because that's an industry I really know. I really enjoy the people there. I understand it. It's fun. And then the competence is like, if I'm going to go into this thing, I don't do anything halfway. So I like to make sure that it passes. I heard somebody else use this term, the corner office test. So I look at somebody and I'm like, okay, that person who's like 5 years ahead of me, do I want to be like that person? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, that's where people end up in a situation where they lean the ladder against the wrong wall, and only to realize that 5, 10, 20, 30 years later, which is a huge tragedy. Yeah. So now that I'll back off of being philosophical and go into the tactics, unless you wanted to jump in with anything before I go there.
No, that's great. I echo each one of those sentiments. Yeah, I'll go for it.
So tactically, there's a business coach I worked with for a couple of years. His name is Dan Martell. He's awesome. You should go check out his YouTube channel. He helps software companies grow and scale, essentially. He's an awesome guy. He's kind of an integrated guy. So he's got, he's really good at business, but he also really focuses on the quality of relationships and his health and his community and stuff like that. But I learned Dan's process for doing a strategic plan, which actually goes big. It's kind of like, essentially what you do is you get a Word document, and I'm going to give you some headers here. One area is the 3-year plan. Then 1 year is the 1-year plan. And then you go into the 4 quarters. So, and then there's even some bigger like mission, vision, 10-year plan stuff. The reason you want to go on the walkabout or the soul searching thing is if you don't have that vision and mission locked, and like that ideal customer kind of locked, and the people you want to work with, and sort of a vision for your life, what we're about to say doesn't matter, because you're going to burn out, or you're going to realize you don't like it, or the ladder's on the wrong tree, or you find yourself unfocused because you don't know where you're going. That's why that vision stuff's really important. It doesn't mean it can't change, but at least kind of spend some time there. And it's amazing what your subconscious mind will do if it kind of knows where you're trying to go. But essentially, if we go down to the year level, what I like to do is a combination of doing like a SWOT analysis: strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, like with your business. What are we good at? What do we average at? What do we suck at? Kind of analysis with honesty. And you can do this as a one-person company or as a big company.
Sure.
These strategic planning meetings work. And then really it comes down to like your 3-year goals. Like, how big do you want to be? Like, what are you going to be known for? What kind of things are launched? What kind of support do you have? What kind of community are you doing? What are all these like big vision goals? Then what's a reasonable amount we can achieve in a year? And then basically, as a company, doing a 1 to 2 day process where you figure these things out at the year and then again at every quarter touch point, you're able to kind of chunk those things down, prioritize them, give yourself permission to not work on this thing that's important this year in quarter 1, just push it down to quarter 2. And then once you're in quarter 1, stay there. The world might change. Some major world event might happen, or some competitor threat might come up, or some partnership opportunity might arise and you can adjust. Doesn't mean you can't adjust. But actually going through your quarterly plan. I mean, I have a browser tab or a bookmark on my computer. I look at it every day just to keep me focused. But that's really what it all boils down to. And if you can, taking a week off a quarter is a smart move. Like I noticed I also study a lot of people that are further along than me. And I noticed a lot of people that are pretty successful take vacations and they do quarterly and annual planning. And, they take, at least a week or 2 off a quarter to refresh and recharge. So I'm like, okay, well, if success leaves clues, maybe I'll do that too.
Yeah. Something you said there, I don't want to overlook, which is, you said, how much can I reasonably get done in this time period? That is key, because we can make all these plans and we can have all these aspirations, but a lot of times, I think sometimes when we look at the big picture, it's really easy to look past what we can get done in a week or a couple of weeks, or even smaller than that in a couple of days. That's kind of what led me to really do the quarter by quarter approach with my goals over the past year or so. Is early this year in 2021, I had these big goals that I wanted to hit by the end of the year, and they're pretty much all changed because I reevaluated some things. I looked at priorities. I also realized one thing I didn't factor in personally in my business, and this stems back to when you interviewed me on your podcast for LMS Cast, which was kind of more of a coaching type of call, is I had all these ideas about where I wanted to go, but then I realized I was kind of more focused on just me, and I wasn't really focused on my target students and my target audience and what they were really going to want and need help with. And so that led me to put more emphasis on what I have in place right now, rather than creating all new courses and new stuff, is revamping courses, putting more into my web design club, which anyone can join at joshhall.co/webdesignclub. Like all these things that are really boosting up what I have in place now and boosting my mission now. I've really had to reevaluate, but it all went back to what I could get done daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, which is really going to be a big impact for the year. Because I do think that's a tricky aspect, is a lot of people have an annual goal, which I think there's a lot of great strengths about that and a good reason to have that as a target. But what you do to get there very well may change, particularly the landscape of things. And sometimes you have really good months and not so great months, and that ends up evening out in some ways too. So I just wanted to bring up that point again, because what you said there, what you can reasonably get done is key. Because it's like, yeah, I can set a goal for myself. And then if you look at it, if you drill down into the depths of everything you just listed out, you may have just created a 90-hour-a-week job for yourself. So it's like, what can you do and maybe that's a good question here, Chris. If we do that, you have these aspirations, what are the tricks and what are some of the tips to get away from creating an 80, 90-hour-a-week job for yourself? Is it delegation? Is it, you talked about investing in software automation. What are some of the things that could come into play to help that if you do want to hit some sort of goal, big, audacious goal?
Yeah, that's great. One of the things, again, I learned from Dan Martell is that if you can, this was a big unlock for me, so hopefully it works for you out there. You got your 3 big rocks for a quarter, whatever those are, big key projects, people to hire, whatever it is, these 3 really important things, but only 3. And I'm going to take even more power away from you.
Okay.
Only one of those can be something new. Two of those are going to be amplifying something that's already working.
Well,
so you get 2 amplify, 1 new. So that right there, just that one thing can like be a game changer. And then what you do is those big rocks, you fill in like the micro pieces under that, like the mini projects under that to achieve those. So there's this story about, you've probably heard about putting the boulder and the pebbles and the sand in the jar. And essentially what you want to do is you want to put your big stuff in the jar, which is your capacity first. So you got 3 big rocks, then you put in the medium stuff, and then you put in the sand. If you try to just put in a bunch of sand and pebbles and then squeeze the big rocks in, they don't fit. So that was a big unlock.
What a great analogy. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And then another thing, and this is just what works for me. I mean, I'm a kind of personal development, productivity junkie, and I'm also a minimalist, and these things kind of work together. So literally for a lot of what I do, I have my strategic document for the year and the quarter and the 3 years and stuff. And then every day I work off of a single piece of paper. And when I start my week, and my day, there's another great quote here, which is plan tomorrow today. So if you can, in your day, planning the next day. And for me, what that means is if I can only get 3 things, what are the 3 most important things I have to get done tomorrow? And I put those down, and only 3, no more. Sure, I'm going to end up doing other stuff and email and whatever, but like, what are the 3 daily tasks or things I need to focus on that serve my quarterly objectives? And just, if you can just lock in that rhythm, that's a huge game changer.
Okay. A couple of great takeaways I have to hit on there. First of all, yes, plan the night before what you're going to do the next day. That actually has helped me sleep better and rest at night. And you would think it'd be opposite. You would think like, well, if I'm already thinking about tomorrow, I might not be able to, zone out tonight or really, just take my time off. But I actually found it's quite the opposite, because if you know what you're going to do, it's like you've already got it out of your head, already got it out, got it on paper, got it in your schedule, whatever it is. That really does help. So that would be a nice little tactical challenge I would encourage everyone to do. Like right now, as you're listening to this, whether it's morning, afternoon, or nighttime, and evening, whatever, think about what you're going to do tomorrow, whatever that looks like for you. That could be written down. It could be in a Google Doc. For me, a lot of times I just look at my calendar and I just mentally take a note of, okay, here are the 3 things I'm going to do. And even in just thinking about like planning in my own head what I'm going to do, even if I don't write it down, I've got less and less strict about writing things down. That's kind of good and bad. Part of me is like, it's kind of nice because it's, I don't have to have a Google Doc that I need to keep track of or anything. But at the same time, I'm kind of going back to trying to write more down. But it really is a release. It's a great point that will help. So that's my challenge for everybody. Try that out for like a week or 2. The other big takeaway for me there, Chris, was the idea of these like 3 big goals, 3 big things every quarter, which would equate to 12 things a year, whatever those 12 things would look like, whether it's a hire or a launch. Only like that is, and as I've looked back, even at what I've done with joshhall.co, like that really does make sense. That's about what I've done. But what I really liked on a deeper level with that was 1 thing new, 2 things that would amplify 2 amplifiers. And so that's great too, because especially as anyone who's doing content creation or marketing, which we all generally are at some point, we're all marketing or selling. It takes a lot of stress off your plate when you might just focus on 1 new thing a quarter, 1 new product, 1 new launch, 1 new webinar that's going to be a sales funnel, whatever it is. I just love that. So you were right. This was the best part of the episode so far, I think.
I got another pro tip I'm going to throw your way. And
let's do it.
I'm a studier of personality types. And I know some people like to plan, like I'm a big planner and calendar and time blocker. And some people are like, I don't want any of that, man. Just let me go. I need to like be creative and stuff. And where I actually ended up is like kind of in the middle, even though I'm more towards the, like, I want to plan everything. But one of the things that's been the most helpful for me, both for the key projects and keeping up with everything else, whatever that is to work through habits more than projects. So the way I do that is I have a lot of recurring events on my calendar, and most of them are things I do with myself. So for example, Wednesdays, for me, I call deep work Wednesdays. So like there's nothing but two giant blocks on my calendar that I never have any meetings besides my one team meeting. And that's where I get a lot of those big rock stuff, that the parts of them that I'm doing done. But then the other thing, like I have this social media block, which was actually this morning, where I do my like kind of business focused social media activity, but I time block it to an hour and a half on Tuesdays at this time in the morning. And then at the end of the day, for me, that's between 5 and 6 p.m. I do what I call enlightened multitasking, which is where the email inbox comes up. I haven't even seen my email until 5 p.m. And at 6 p.m., my wife is going to be upset if I'm not in for dinner. So there is only an hour and it is not expanding. So I get in there, and then that's when I do all the the multitasking brain work. I might be all over the place getting pinged here to here, but throughout the day and in combination with my morning routine, all the key stuff has been done. And then that exhausting multitasking is just the last thing I do. Right. And then at the very, go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, you mentioned it's not going to expand past that. What is that? Parkinson's law, where it's like a task will expand with the amount of time that you give it. So
totally.
If you laid out 8 hours to do email, you would take 8 hours to do email, probably.
Exactly. And that's true on the micro, like on the day, but it's also true on the macro. So if you're doing your quarterly planning and you're like, oh, I need like a couple years to figure out my course. What if you only had a quarter? What if you only had a month? What if it was like 1 rock in this 3 rock quarter and this MVP needs to roll out this month? Like, you can do different versions of things, and you don't always hit it perfectly. And sometimes, you need more time in the next week or month or year even, but it definitely expands. So test your assumptions on like how long you think something should or needs to take.
Yeah, that's great. And those deep work segments I found to be huge. I've talked a lot about that on the podcast over the past couple of years for sure, is really creating segments in your day and your work week. And I know not everybody listening is in the exact same roles that we are as you, owner and CEO of LifterLMS, doing a lot of calls, and me as a course creator and content creator and stuff. But I did learn this stuff and these principles as a solopreneur and as an agency owner scaling my business. Like, it all applies. The reason I was able to take my business now to the level it's at within a couple of years is all of the lessons that I learned, mostly the hard way, as a solopreneur and a freelancer and agency owner, as a web designer. But that's key too. Like, all web designers can control their schedule. You don't have to be a 24/7 support person. That's a biggie for web designers, is they keep their email open all day, notifications on and phone on all day. Those are the recipes for disaster and burnout right there, if you do all those. But just like you said, Chris, if you can allocate certain tasks to certain times a day. I know practically one thing that really helped me as a web designer, fulfilling a lot of different web design projects with a lot of different clients, was having a block of my day for reactionary work. Because inevitably, as a web designer, you're going to have something go wrong or challenge is going to come up. If you have a reactionary work block every day, even if it's just a half an hour or an hour, that time is gold. And even if you see an issue in the morning, you can say, oh, I'll get to it in my reactionary block unless the site's down or something. Sounds like that's along the same lines of what you've learned to do to kind of craft your lifestyle and what works for your days, your times, your call schedule, et cetera. So I just wanted to throw some web design specific examples in there because it really translates to what you're talking about.
And one more tip for the web designers out there is you can also theme your days, like, marketing Mondays, client call Tuesdays, do the actual implementation Wednesdays and Thursdays, and Friday is working on your business type activities. Like, just by chunking things out can happen in large and small and medium-sized scales.
Yeah. And something you mentioned earlier that I forgot about, but perfect time to bring this back up, is the idea of like planning something, but then also realizing there is a creative aspect to what we do as web designers. And this is really tricky because you can say, okay, Tuesday, I'm going to work on this website. And then what happens? Tuesday morning comes around and got nothing. I've got no creativity. And that's the worst. And I've been there. And when I got really serious about running my business and working on the business, I struggled with that because I was like, okay, I've got like, 5 hours allotted to this website, but then I've just got nothing. And then I'm doing dishes at 9 p.m. at night. And then my inspiration hits and I'm like, oh man, I wish I could be working on the site now. So one thing I learned that helped me was to give some grace in and around those theme days or those segments to where if for some reason I just wasn't feeling it on that Tuesday, whatever I had on the books for Wednesday, unless it was a scheduled call or something, I would move and I would do Tuesday. Like maybe I would move forward to working on my business then, and then I would save this project till Wednesday or this part of the project. So have you ever experienced anything like that where, because we are balancing creativity and productivity, which is really tricky. You got like two different sides of the brain working. I see you smiling, so I bet you got a lot of thoughts on that.
I do. This might be another one of those key parts of the show. Yeah. So as an entrepreneur, and especially if you come from the web design world or this the kind of the creative world, it's this kind of strange combination of like extreme right brain creative work with no boundaries mixed with this very left brain, like budgeting, project management, feature requirements kind of thing. And these two worlds collide. You can do it all as one person and you'll have, your specialties and whatnot. And maybe as you grow and you build a team, you have some people that kind of exist in different parts of that. But when it comes to building your business or building a course or a coaching program or building a website for a client, I think it's really important to go through the creative brain first. And I'm a big mind mapper. So I just start like just throwing ideas like on this whiteboard behind me or on my iPad or on a piece of paper. If I'm like coming up with like a course idea or some kind of, what can we do this quarter before we get into like the really rigid strategy document? Let's just go crazy, put on some music, see what happens. And if that mood strikes me when I'm supposed to be, doing something that's just more mechanical, I'm going to ditch it if I can and just go with it. Cause when it strikes, it strikes.
Yeah.
And, I even get out of bed. Like, this is the thing. This is how and you don't lose the passion to tie it back into the theme of the show. I wake up every morning excited. And sometimes I wake up early. This is one of the best things from the water fast, by the way, is that I literally was a night person staying up till 4 a.m. And I reconnected with the earlier version of myself, which was an early riser. I started getting up early again, but I will sometimes wake up at 4 o'clock this morning and just go. And there's no distraction. It's dark. And I will go into some creative process. But figuring out how to go left brain, right brain, and not feel guilty about it if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time is it's important. And the best outcome comes from kind of marrying those two together. It's an iterative process.
Yeah. We got to talk about the problem that I'm sure you've faced many times, because I know I sure have. And that is when you're in the zone and you're in the flow and you're like, oh, I've got it. Like you said it, lightning is struck. And then you look at your clock, and you're like, shit, I've got a call in 10 minutes. So then it's like, while I'm right in the heat of this, creativity, now I've got a call or something. And I've had to actually really work out how I plan that around doing podcasts and stuff like that. How have you, do you think it's as simple as just planning, like almost planning time for that lightning to strike versus not doing anything creative around call days and call times? Like, what are some of the, I guess my question is, have you gone through that and what did you learn? How did you learn to make sure that doesn't happen with getting those inspirational moments right before the mechanical stuff or calls and things like that?
Well, first of all, like even I remember we had a meeting that you kept canceling or whatever. I didn't feel bad about that at all. You were like rescheduling it. Like, I'm like, all right, he's got something going. It's cool. I totally get that. And maybe you were in one of those things. So like first you see it in other people, but also in yourself, you should respect it. I think it kind of comes back to that morning routine for me and the nature stuff. So a lot of my best stuff does not happen in my office. Yeah. I'll be out on a trail, walking my dogs in the woods, just even like, I'll like just be doing something normal, like washing the dishes. And then I got to like get my journal and write something down. The first thing is you have to do an idea capture. So it happens to me all the time, almost every day while I'm out walking or running or whatever. I stop, I grab my phone and I do voice to text and email myself some kind of message once I look at that, it'll trigger where my head was when that thing, whatever it was, came in. So the first thing is to just capture it. And I mean, you can do some on your board, like or on a piece of paper, and it's kind of funny how often I email myself not in my workstation. And that little, even if sometimes it's a misspelled word, I'm like, cool, that's it. All that thing about like, oh, a lot of your best ideas in the shower, you forget, it's true. You do forget. Yeah. So capture that thing. And then
that's a great point, by the way. My camera, like my photos are mostly of my girls and then random like screenshots of stuff that I'll remember or I'll see. And I'm like, oh, this gave me a good idea. And then what I'll do is usually like once a week or so, I'll like send those to myself, or I'll just take a snapshot of what I was, or I'll take a screenshot or a picture of something that reminded me of something I should do on a chorus or a call, or if I forgot about something. Or I saw that Chris posted the episode I was on LifterLMS cast. I want to remind myself to listen to that tomorrow. I might take a screenshot of it and then see it tomorrow. So yeah, I just wanted to back that up because I do the same thing, and it's usually stuff on my phone or little notes or something.
A lot of us use Slack too. I Slack myself more than I Slack my team. Like it's kind of like, I think people used to use Evernote. I mean, maybe you'd still do, but like for me, I just Slack myself. I don't have all the tags in the organization, but I'm constantly Slacking myself when I find something.
It's weird, isn't it? Like you would think it's kind of a weird practice, but what you're doing is so valuable with going back to this idea of keeping the passion alive. And that is to get stuff out of your head, even if you email yourself. Or I do find it helps that if you almost like take yourself out of your own shoes and treat yourself like a different person. Like right now, you're Chris off of you're clocked out. So you shouldn't need to think about this. So yeah, email Chris who's going to be on tomorrow. And that's who will worry about it. It really is. It's weird, but it's as simple as that to keep your sanity day to day doing web design and entrepreneurial tasks.
I also use Twitter in this way. Like if I'm listening to a podcast and I learn something, if it's like directly, sometimes I'll just write what I heard and I try to give credit where credit's due and like tag or quote the person. But sometimes I'll get an idea and then in my head from somebody, and then it'll merge with another idea I have in my head. And then those two ideas have a baby. Now that's an original thought. And I'll just like tweet it. And then when it pops in my head, like, oh, what was that thing where, and I just go through my Twitter thing and I find it. It's just crazy the tools we have to like curate inspiration. That's probably the most important part.
Yeah. And I know I'm somebody who has continually and over the years become more and more simplistic with my tool set. I really don't use that much. I don't even use Slack anymore. I don't really use much at all. Like I try to keep stuff out of my head, but I have notoriously like lessened my toolbox and just stuck to basic strategies, pen and paper a lot of times, notes on my phone, pictures, whatever, just to keep it simple. Because I think that's something that's overwhelming for a lot of people is like, well, now do I need like a certain tool for this and a certain tool for this? And that can be overwhelming in itself. So I would encourage everyone, no matter where you are, just do what works for you. Like for you, Chris, I don't have Twitter. I don't use Twitter at all. So I'm not going to take that approach, but by golly, if that works for you, that's awesome. And I definitely encourage everyone to do what works for them. I am curious, we've talked a lot about tactics and implementation, stuff like that, but at the core of keeping passion alive, you talked about in the beginning, what led you to that passion, what the goal is, what your mission is as a company. How do you revisit that? Like, do you look at, is your podcast kind of a thing for you that helps you reinvigorate your passion because you hear from customers? Like, do you look at testimonials and reviews? I guess on that note, for customers, how do you keep the passion alive by going back to them? What kind of things have you done to keep that passion alive, with your current customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's some things that never get old, like a PayPal notification. So-and-so just paid you, whatever. Like those never get old, even after a decade of business.
Yeah. God, I'm so sick of seeing these payments come in. Oh.
But when you get a positive testimonial or, I've had crazy stuff happen, like where people say like, oh, did you know that your software, I'm thinking of Ziv, who's a great guy in Israel who, he teaches in a really small niche called balloon artists, like the child entertainers that tie animal balloons. He used our software, and his first year he did $277K in a very micro niche that there's only like 5,000 serious balloon artists in the world. And when you hear stuff like that and you see it, it's like so inspiring. And sure, like, as a software company, as an example, we get like customer support or tech, people are having tech troubles, and that's hard and it's not as inspiring, but it's a part of the landscape is supporting people when things aren't working. But, so really, there's a couple things we do to kind of systematize that and lock it into the business. Because we're bigger and we have a team on Thursdays, I run a team meeting, kind of an all hands meeting. And I put a segment in that call where it's called wins, and anybody on the team can share a customer win, a company win, or a personal win in their life, or all three, or not saying anything, and that's completely fine. And so that process has really kind of reminded us, or gives us space. A lot of entrepreneurs don't celebrate where they're at. And you have to make the space. It's all right, on to the next fire. But if you kind of take a moment to reflect and celebrate, it means a lot, especially in a team.
And especially with a team of your size, one thing that James Rose, the founder of Content Snare, who's a close buddy of mine, one thing he started doing was he realized his dev team all they were doing was handling problem tickets and support tickets and putting out fires. And it dawned on him that they are not seeing the wins of the company. So he did something similar. It was like, he's going to share when somebody sends a good note and something like, your product helped me do this. He wants to make sure they see that. And that's one thing I've tried to implement with my team too, although it's really small right now. I just have Cam, my VA, and then Nathan, my podcast editor. But I know one thing for her, for example, was, we added transcriptions, like full transcriptions to every podcast episode from episode like 50 on. We're still backlogging the catalog and adding more transcriptions, but it's a lot of work. And she does a lot of work weekly on that. And I got an email from a gal I think she was in Spain. And she said, hey, I just want to thank you so much for adding the transcriptions, because I don't speak English as a first language. Now I can listen to the episode and follow along, and it's really helped me. So I shared that with her, and I said, hey, I just want to let you know your work is not in vain. Like, this is, where there's probably a lot more of this going on that people haven't told us about. And if that is you, let me know. Go to my website, joshhall.co, click contact, and let me know of anything like that, because I love that kind of stuff. But that's I think just an example I wanted to share, because I shared that with her and it made her day. She was like, thank you so much for sending this. It really, it makes that work go so much faster and better for me. So sounds like you've implemented something similar.
Totally. And I even do it myself on that piece of paper I work off. I do the 3 things I have to get done that day, but I also do 3 things I'm grateful for. So when you experience gratitude, it's just like a big reset. So, and that's an idea I borrowed from the 5-minute journal, but you got to stop and like appreciate or be appreciated.
Now, was it Zev?
Yeah.
How did he contact you? Was it just random, or did you put a request out for a review or a testimonial? Because that's another big thing, is if you don't ask for testimonials, you're probably not going to get many testimonials. Not many people are just randomly going to be saying, hey, by the way, I love your work. Some will, but it's going to be rare. Like I've really tried to go out of the way when somebody does any sort of service for me and say, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Most people are not like that. And it's not a fault of their own. Often it's just, we're busy. And unless you ask for a review or ask for feedback, you may not get it. So in that case, how did you hear from him? Was it random or was it intentional?
Well, sometimes it's random, but recently I hired a head of customer success, which includes kind of the final stage in the customer journey, which is evangelism. like testimonials, case studies, things like that.
Yeah.
So when I hired this role, I needed to like really systematize like our existing processes and procedures around evangelism, which is testimonials, case studies, reviews, those kinds of things, becoming an affiliate partner, all that stuff. So I went through an inventory and I did what's worked. So this is another area, you're a good interviewer, where I'm going to give all my best secrets away here, which are, you do have to ask for it. One of the reasons why it's great to have a community, an online community, is sometimes you'll just capture it. You'll see somebody say something.
Yes.
So one thing you need to do there is just get in the habit of taking a screenshot. I always like to ask for permission to like reshare it somewhere else outside of those places or whatever. But so get in the habit of like, when you see it, capture it, have a folder or an Airtable or whatever the tool you use to like store these things. Cause you'd be surprised as a business over time. If you're doing things halfway okay, it's going to you're not going to be able to keep up with them all, because there's going to be a lot.
Yes.
And you'll miss them. But then if you actually ask for them, you'll get a lot. So here's some pro tips. If you're running a team and you're using a tool like Help Scout, it's got like this, how was my reply, rate my reply. And when people hit the like awesome button, we have an automation that like kind of sends them into our advocacy flow of like, hey, do you have something to say? Can you leave us a review? And so on. And then maybe we find out about their story and do a case study. The other thing you can do inside courses is at the very end of a course, like towards the last lesson, I'd recommend using a form of some kind to capture a review. And I don't like reviews that are like kind of conditional, like you must do this, it must be good. It's more like, hey, it's a great time to leave a review or feedback, positive, negative, or neutral, so we can learn what we're doing right, be inspired, or if we're falling down in some way, learn so we can improve. So that's like a great kind of way to get honest feedback. And some of the best stuff you can kind of roll towards the testimonial flow, and the more constructive criticism you can roll into improving and amplifying in your next quarter. We're going to make this course better. I think
great point. Great point. And what you said there about capturing the unassuming type of responses, that's huge. And I found that as a web designer, some of the best testimonial snippets I got were just random emails, or it was like at the end of a project, like we would launch and they would say, I'm so pumped about the website. Thank you so much. You have been like the best web designer I've ever worked with. And I think about how many times I just let that go by and I didn't save that and I didn't use that as a snippet. And it just comes down to you just asking, I really appreciate what you said. Can I use that as a testimonial? Because what happens often is when you request a testimonial, some testimonials are awesome, but then inevitably some people who aren't comfortable writing or not comfortable on camera, if they send a video review or whatever, it becomes really stiff and really rigid. And it's like, Josh's service was immaculate and my website has exceeded far all my expectations. It's like really, it's like clear that, okay, they really like overthought this and made it a little too strict and again, kind of rigid, to where, those genuine replies can be the best. I know I practically found this out with my web design club. I did a push for reviews and stuff from the club. And what was really funny is I had a lot of members who just were messaging me and said amazing things, but sometimes the official review again came a little more like, and it was just a little more stiff sounding. And I ended up just going back to him and being like, actually, you already said something similar in the messaging. Do you mind if I just use this as a testimonial? And that's the way it worked out. So that's a great point. Those little snippets of praise and wins and things that can't 100% be a testimonial snippet. Don't let those go by. Take a screenshot, put them in a folder, put them in a spreadsheet. Like you said, keep track of those. It's one thing I'm really challenging myself to do right now, especially like I do get the occasional emails of people asking stuff and they'll be like, by the way, like your podcast is a huge benefit. I really just love listening to it. It's helped me grow my business. And I'm usually quick to save that and say, would you mind leaving that as a review? Or repurposing that. So I don't want to get us too far. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to give one more pro tip is, you can escalate them too. So this is one of the great things about having a podcast is, I interview people like you who are in my industry and stuff, but I also interview customers So like Ziv, after I saw like, whoa, what's this balloon thing and 277K and all this stuff, I'm like, hey, Ziv, do you want to come on my podcast and tell your story? And so I was then able to interview him, which is where we amassed like all the material for a detailed case study.
Yeah.
And like asking your customer to write a case study is not fair. So you should write the case study, but anybody can, if they want to, can jump on a call and talk to you for about an
just
hour.
do a call. Yeah. So it's so funny, man. We were talking about Gino earlier on or before we went live. He was actually just on recently on the podcast episode 144. And the main theme of that podcast was doing case studies and interviews as marketing tools. And that is such an underrated way to create content and get amazing feedback as a case study. And it's just to simply have a call and record it and talk about what you learned in the process or feature them and what they're doing with their website or whatever it is. I'm so glad you said that, because it's a really underrated way to get a really good type of testimonial, is to have some sort of case study that goes a little more in depth and can be used for reviews and testimonials. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, Chris, it's already been an hour and a half, man, or almost an hour and a half.
That was quick.
You, we could definitely bust out a 3 hour, 2 hour is the max so far on the podcast. That's been the record. But if there was anybody I would trust to beat that record, it would be you. So maybe we'll have to plan that one day.
We went Joe Rogan on it. And I just want to leave one final thought too here is on the topic of passion. Sometimes you will see the masses or somebody you respect or a pop culture figure lose passion. It doesn't mean that the show's over or that you have to follow. And what I mean by that is, you mentioned in the beginning, the changes with LearnDash. And I also have a lot of respect for what Justin's done, and also writing about his honest take on his entrepreneur journey. LearnDash is 2 years older than LifterLMS. He's been at it longer than me. But just because, and we've seen this a lot in the WordPress community. So if there's any agency people watching out there, WordPress kind of focused people, I've seen people say that like, oh, I lost my passion for WordPress. I see it happen all the time, like throughout the years. And just because somebody loses it, it doesn't mean the project's doomed or that your days are numbered. Like, everybody's different. Everybody's kind of living their own path. Just like
they probably didn't hear this episode. So
yeah, everybody's running their own race, and passion, and it's okay to change passion. If you're done, like, it's fine to move on, but ultimately it's your choice and your kind of discovery to figure that out. I think WordPress has a lot of legs in it, a lot of longevity. I think there's never been a more exciting time to be a web designer. The tools and like the templates and everything is awesome. The ability to, sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine.
Ability to become an entrepreneur and like kind of get an online business started. The tooling has never been better. Like,
the demand for web yes, it's go time. Well said. The demand for web designers, the emphasis on work-life balance, like we've talked about. My gosh, community, the options for community now. Yeah. The time is now, man. I'm super excited about that. And to that point, like, I pivoted big time, talk about a change in passion. I didn't lose passion for my client work and web design. I had so much more passion with this and doing courses and helping other web designers that just far exceeded what I wanted to do with client work, which is why I moved from that and why I sold my agency and why I focused 100% on courses. So I feel like another maybe final point, I was going to ask you a final thought, so you already got to it, but I think sometimes you don't necessarily, or you might not lose passion, but you might have something else come into the picture that you're even more excited about. And that might make you shift a little bit. And it sounds like that's kind of what you found out with Lifter, right? It was something that you tried out and it really came to the forefront for you.
100%. And I just want to find this quote by Steve Jobs about connecting the dots. And what he said is that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, your destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down and has made all the difference in my life. So the windy road, like sometimes it doesn't make sense, but in the rearview mirror, like the dots connect, and maybe you pivot on your passion and stuff like that. But as long as you keep that fire going and maybe it changes to a different fuel source, at the end, you'll look back and the dots connect.
Yeah. Well said. I forgot about that quote. I haven't heard that in years, but that's a great representation of this in particular. Man, Chris, we've talked a lot. Speaking of weaving in and out, we've really weaved in and out of the different ways to keep passion alive during a journey, from tactical kind of things. But it really all starts, if I could kind of encapsulate this talk, it starts with knowing who you are, what your goal is, what your mission is, who you serve, surrounding yourself with people to come alongside you in your journey, doing the habits, the daily things that are going to keep you going and make you wake up excited to start your day. I think being self-aware about yourself and your projects and the planning annually, quarterly, the big rocks, the little stones, the sand, everything mixed together. That was wonderful. Man, working with the team, scheduling, all those things that we've talked about. I really feel like kind of fleshed out some really good ways to keep passion alive. So I thoroughly enjoyed this chat, man. Thanks so much for taking a big chunk out of your day. Where would you like everyone to go listening to this? Is there a certain resource you want? Go to your podcast? Where would you like everyone to go as we get ready to sign off here, man?
If you haven't heard of my podcast, it's called LMS Cast. And if you want to see a guy with passion, I would just do a Google search for LMS Cast and then Ziv Raviv Balloon Artist. You'll find the episode. And that's what I love about education entrepreneurs like you, Josh, is like when an education entrepreneur really steps into their passion, all the dots connect and it tends to work out. So go check out LMS Cast, and you can also find me at all the things Lifter LMS.
Awesome. I'll find that episode and we'll link it in the show notes too. I'm excited to check that out. Chris, thanks for your time again, man. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. And I just want to say we did have one round there where I had to keep on rescheduling, but I hope you knew that was a rare occurrence. That's not common for me. I think that was a rare case of things popping up, but as a family guy and as somebody you used to have little girls, you know how it goes sometimes. So
totally.
Not rare, but I appreciate that, man. I really appreciate you. Always have a great time chatting. And I'm already looking forward to round 3 when we get to it, man. I'm sure it'll be an awesome one.
Let's do it. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Chris. Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.